Come on in, welcome to Idle Down, where we talk all things Survivor. My name is Luke, and today we're talking about 5 Survivor players who got so paranoid they played themselves right out of the game. Every Survivor player experiences paranoia. It's something to be expected when you're playing a game where blindsides, double crosses, and knives in the back from people you thought were your friends are all expected. A healthy degree of paranoia can even be good, and knowing when to trust your gut and when your paranoia is unfounded is what separates the good players from the bad. The thing about being really paranoid on Survivor is, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy sometimes. An unnecessarily paranoid ally can be flaky, skittish, or just plain annoying. In fact, plenty of players have been extremely paranoid and nearly paid the ultimate price for it. Take Heather in Survivor 41, for example, who needlessly started a live tribal due to her own paranoia right before the vote, had the target immediately turned around on her, and then still escaped the vote unscathed. Okay, actually that's a boss move now that I say it out loud. Why did they purple her again? Still, there are 5 players who did what Heather could not. Get so paranoid, they got themselves voted out. Which survivors paranoided themselves out of the game? Let's find out. All that said, let's dig into 5 Survivor players whose paranoia resulted in their elimination. At number 5 is Natalia in Survivor David vs. Goliath. The David and Goliath tribes swapped in episode 4, and this really could not be a more favorable swap for Natalia. She was sent to the Vuku tribe with her Goliath bestie Kara, and the guy she's kind of been flirting with, Alec. They were joined by 2 members of the original David tribe, Davy and Elizabeth. Heading into the swap, every former Goliath wanted to stay Goliath strong, and by random chance, they just happened to have the numerical advantage on all 3 post-swap tribes. On top of that, whichever tribe lost the first immunity challenge would vote someone off, then receive Carl, a former David, who was sent to exile, further incentivizing the Goliaths to stick together and pick off a David at this first vote. Wow, if you're a Goliath, you'd have to work really, really, really hard to screw this up. At Vuku, Kara, Alec, and Natalia all make their pledge to stick together, but immediately Natalia notices her allies doing weird things like talking to the other people on the tribe, having conversations with them, laughing. Natalia is particularly upset by Kara and Elizabeth bonding over horses, which these really are the 2 types of horse girls in the world, aren't they? Kara fears that Elizabeth will somehow usurp her position as Kara's bestie, so she puts a hit out on Elizabeth. After Vuku lose immunity, it seems like it's over for Elizabeth, but Natalia cannot handle that others are talking without her and views every little conversation she's not part of as some sort of sinister coup attempt against her. Calm down, Natalia. They're just talking about the best brushes to brush horsehair, or whatever it is horse girls talk about. Natalia gets so paranoid that it's going to flip around on her that she starts getting really overbearing about the vote and needs constant reassurance from Alec and Kara that they're on her side, which becomes so annoying that Alec just decides to cut bait on her at Tribal Council, letting Elizabeth live to talk about horses another day. At number 4 is Danny in Survivor Winners at War. So I know this is a notoriously deceptively edited episode, and that according to Danny, there was a lot cut from the episode which puts her paranoia in context, but that does not change the fact that Danny paranoia'd her way out of the game. In Winners at War, the tightest alliance on the Sele tribe was an old school contingent consisting of Boston Rob, Parvati, and Ethan, with Danny as a distant 4th by proxy. Danny was ostensibly in with this group, but it kind of felt like she just didn't gel as well with the other 3 old schoolers as they did with each other. That makes sense. These 3 have history in the game together going back nearly 20 years and have played a combined 12 times. Danny was on one season 14 years ago and disappeared from the Survivor community almost entirely. Sorry, Danny, you should have been on a season people like. As the episode portrays it, after Sele loses immunity, Dani goes completely off the wall. She outs the old school alliance to Ben while Ethan is standing right there, and feeling that her relationship with Parvati deteriorated because she saw Parvati laughing on the beach without her, she goes to Boston Rob and pitches a Parvati boot. You know, Parvati, Rob's closest ally and one of the only people on the season interested in protecting him, immediately after it's clear that not only most of his tribe, but the entire other tribe is after him, considering they literally just voted out his wife. That Parvati? Yes. Due to Dani's recklessly paranoid overplaying, new and old school set aside their differences and come together to take her out as an easy consensus boot. Now, there is a lot of additional context to Dani's paranoia that was left on the cutting room floor. I don't usually like to go behind the scenes too much, but the source of Dani's paranoia is kind of fun. According to Dani, she was accused of going through Jeremy's bag, which she claims she didn't. These false accusations are what set off her paranoia in the first place, and that, combined with Parvati pinning the initial Natalie vote on her, put her in the crosshairs a bit on Sele after the first vote. While the edit painted her paranoia as completely unjustified, in reality it seems she was catching at least a little heat. Still, managing paranoia is Survivor 101. Dani lost it under pressure and started throwing out the wrong names to the wrong people at the wrong time in an increasingly desperate bid to save herself, and it was received by this cast about as well as Survivor Guatemala was received by fans. Not sure that Jamie Newton playbook is the one you should be running, Dani. You might try, you know, your own. At number 3 is Dan in Survivor Gabon. I'm going to say at the top that Dan passed away in 2016, and as we saw on the show, Dan was a wonderful, kind, and gentle person, so just to be respectful in the comments, please. Dan was a truly unique character on Survivor. He wasn't there to scheme or lie or even win the money. He was genuinely there on a journey of self-discovery to find himself. He was kind of like a modern Gabriel Cade in that respect. That means that unfortunately, Dan was not a great Survivor player in the traditional sense. Wholesome and way too nice for this game, Dan spent much of his time in Gabon trying to find his place in the tribal dynamics. At the end of the day, Dan just wanted a home and some validation. Despite his social awkwardness, Dan was pretty safe on pre-swap Fong just by virtue of being one of the only non-grannies on this tribe, but at the swap, his paranoia kicked in hard. When Dan, Susie, and Randy were swapped to Coda, they were outnumbered 4-3, and Randy quickly integrated himself with the Onion Alliance, leaving Dan and Susie at the bottom of the tribe. Almost immediately, Dan was fully ready to throw his whole lot in with this new Coda tribe. He liked their company. I think he would have gone to Final 7 with this group if he could have. And if he just sat still and did nothing, when this tribe inevitably went to Tribal Council in episode 6, Susie would have gone home. But Dan was so paranoid that Marcus, Corinne, and Charlie didn't like him that they started to not like him. As Marcus says in the episode, he wishes he could save Dan from himself, but he cannot. Dan could have been a useful number, but Randy successfully infiltrated that alliance instead. Although, who knows how well that would have worked out for him long term. Marcus isn't very good at keeping dicks under wraps. Dan's constant need for validation and approval ultimately ruined his game, as he ended up as the boot over Susie, despite Susie's best efforts.
Okay, I want to be honest with you. I was actually going to vote you. Because? Why?
Dan's paranoia is unique from everyone else on this list. I don't think he was concerned about winning. He genuinely just wanted a place in a majority alliance with people who accepted him as he is. Unfortunately for him, they did not. At number 2 is Lindsay in Survivor 43. For the first 3 episodes of Survivor 43, it seemed like the Coco tribe was unstoppable. With a tribe full of challenge beasts, puzzle gods, strategic masterminds, and Geo, Coco was steamrolling the other 2 tribes with ease, so much so that in the episode 4 immunity challenge, Baka and Vessi team up to finally send Coco to Tribal Council. For almost the entire length of the pre-merge, the target on this tribe's been the pair of Ryan and Geo. Not that they knew that. A women's alliance plus James formed early. Ryan and Geo were an obvious pair. This was a done deal for like 8 days. Gio is leaving. There is no question. Well, seems pretty simple. Lindsay, any thoughts on the boot tonight?
I feel like I'm somebody that needs to be targeted.
If you insist. Lindsay is probably the biggest fan of this show on a season full of big fans. She's applied for years, knows everything about Survivor, plus she is physically strong and mentally sharp. That means that she felt like she should be the target, even though up to this point, she was playing well, had allies, and was not at risk of elimination. Yet in one of the wildest own goals in the history of this show, Lindsay manifested herself into a target by constantly needing to be reassured by her close allies that she was not in any danger. Which she was not. Not even Ryan and Gio were going to vote her out. They were going to vote for Cassidy. But over the course of the afternoon, Lindsay's paranoia became too much for her tribe mates to handle. They wondered, if Lindsay is this paranoid on a vote that could not be more cut and dry, how will she be in a merge scenario? How will she be in a vote with razor-thin margins? Will she spill the beans or possibly flip? Overly paranoid players play skittishly, and the risk of Lindsay betraying Coco for sweeter pastures at the merge was just too big a risk for Carla, James, and Cassidy to handle. So they took Lindsay out at their first tribal council. Wow, she is the 8D chess Survivor mastermind we all thought she was going to be pre-season. In the single course of an afternoon, she completely manifested a consensus boot out of thin air. Absolute legend. The most paranoid player of all time, whose paranoia directly led to their elimination, is Jamie in Survivor Guatemala. At the merge in Guatemala, there were two distinct alliances, the minority Yasha Alliance and the majority Nakum Alliance. With a majority of 6-4, the new Nakum crew intended to pagong Yasha and go to Final 6 together. Despite some explosive personalities, this was actually a pretty cohesive group, and those at the top were quite good at reining in those at the bottom. But at the Final 8 of Guatemala, one member of the majority begins to unravel, Jamie Newton. Up to this point, Jamie's been a solid vote for his alliance, and outside of his bizarre and heated rivalry with Bobby John, for the most part, he's actually pretty chill around camp. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But after the merge, Jamie slowly begins to grow paranoid. He begins losing it, like in a real way. Things get serious for his alliance after the vote at Final 8 in a discussion over who Gary voted for. Jamie's upset that Gary, who's in the minority, voted for Cindy, and everyone's baffled by this. Not even Cindy's mad. Like, yeah, who's he gonna vote for? It has to be one of us. Thus begins the unraveling of Jamie Newton. Yeah, incredibly, this is Jamie fully raveled. After failing to win a post-merge reward that sent two of his closest allies to an oasis with the last two members of the Minority Alliance, Jamie's paranoia kicks into high gear. In one sense, his paranoia is a little justified, just not for the time being. Rafe is kinda wishy-washy about going to Final 3 with him, although in Rafe's defense, he's probably had the same conversation with Jamie 7 times today. And at the reward, Danny and Gary are working their hardest to flip Stephanie and Judd. Gary's even got an extra pep in his step today. Look at that beautiful landscaping. But Jamie's tight with Judd, he's tight with Rafe, he's tight with Lydia, and there's no risk that he'll go home. Gary's the target. The 6 are committed to Final 6. Gary Hawkins is getting sent to the well-manicured lawn in the sky. But Jamie's constant need for reassurance from his allies grinds their patience down to nothing, and his paranoia becomes so annoying that they just decide to manifest his own blindside fears just to be rid of the irritation. Oh god, and this guy's explosive too. I wonder how he'll take it.
Blindsided. Nice! Now that's how you vote somebody out.
Wait, what the fuck? This guy took his self-made blindside well? This guy?
Hey, right there!
Got nothing else for ya. If you want to nicely blindside me with some views, like and subscribe and I'll get you more Survivor content just like this. Until next time, don't get idled out.